Joann Emerson, Member of Congress, 8th District, Missouri. Congress of the United States, House of Representatives, Washington, D.C., July 21, 2006. Dear Dr. Hall, thank you for contacting me regarding H.R. 5252, the Communications Opportunity Promotion and Enhancement Act of 2006, and the network neutrality provisions. I spent a great deal of time studying this issue before voting against the Markey Amendment to replace network neutrality provisions already written into the bill.
The COPE Act, that would be H.R. 5252, includes network neutrality in the form of the FCC. That is, the FCC would be in charge of enforcing network neutrality, rather than a law, as is specified in the Markey Amendment. The FCC is a 5-member board that's appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. It's not elected by anybody. 3 of them are Republicans, 2 of them are Democrats. In August of 2005, the FCC made a very important ruling. The FCC ruled that DSL was not bound by open access, which meant that DSL no longer had to open their lines to competition from other internet service providers. So this meant that in most places, we're kind of stuck with 2 choices. One giant cable company, one DSL company. This FCC ruling, of course, meant that competition could be greatly decreased. This ruling also put DSL companies into a position where they could control the information that went across their networks, such that they could degrade some information and enhance other information, thus violating network neutrality. So, the COPE Act deals with net neutrality by allowing the FCC to be in charge of it. The same FCC that ruled against open access for DSL, greatly decreasing competition and also opening the door for the violation of net neutrality. That's a really good idea.
I'm glad to have the opportunity to share my position with you. Network neutrality is a principle that bases the organization of the Internet on equal access to different sources of information at equal speeds. For example, network neutrality would discourage a system in which one website could pay to have its data delivered by a service provider at a faster prioritized speed. The debate in Congress has centered around how federal laws should work to preserve or promote network neutrality and how extensive those regulations should be. The recent COPE Act posed 2 approaches to network neutrality, one of which was passed within the legislation.
The COPE Act approach is to let the FCC handle it. Did I say that already?
The Markey Amendment, if adopted, would have treated video data which must be transferred at high rates of speed to be seen by the customer the same as any other piece of data referenced on the Internet.
Okay, here's like one of the most misunderstood things about the Markey Amendment and network neutrality in general. And so what I'm going to do is kind of read this to you because I'm thinking that maybe Representative Emerson or her staff never had a chance to read this part of the legislation because there's some kind of a misunderstanding. If a broadband network provider prioritizes or offers enhanced quality of service to data of a particular type, for example, video, I just added that, it's not actually in the bill, it must prioritize or offer enhanced quality to all data of that type, regardless of the origin or ownership of such data, without imposing a surcharge or other consideration for such prioritization or enhanced quality of service. So, in other words, the Markey Amendment does not say you can't treat video different than text or audio or whatever. What it says is you can't discriminate on different sources.
Under the bill passed in the U.S. House of Representatives, broadband video data could be treated separately in order to preserve its continuity.
Interestingly enough, the COPE Act left out the part about you couldn't discriminate based on where the data came from.
But other network neutrality provisions would apply and be enforced by the Federal Communications Commission.
The FCC will take care of that. Right.
Companies such as Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo, content and application providers, are concerned that access could be degraded or denied to certain websites if network neutrality provisions are not set in place.
Big companies such as Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo. Oh yeah, and a grassroots coalition of about a skazillion people and organizations, including bloggers, podcasters, and video bloggers, including internet startups and other small businesses where much of the innovation is driven, including organizations with voices and messages as diverse as MoveOn.org and the Christian Coalition. Oh yeah, and the Richard Show, the entire Richard Show Corporation. So let's review. Who supports network neutrality? Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo, a giant grassroots coalition, and the Richards Show.
Additionally, supporters of network neutrality provisions have raised concerns over the ability of small businesses to obtain agreements with big providers to ensure their customers have access to fast internet delivery. Opponents of network neutrality feel that internet usage has evolved and is now being used for more than email and website capabilities. For instance, cable service and movies are now being transmitted over the internet, and additional innovations are expected. Some companies providing internet service such as AT&T and Verizon look forward to these innovations but need the security of knowing their video content will be delivered at a high enough speed to be seen uninterrupted by their customers.
Their video content. Their video content. Their video content.
Internet providers feel that network neutrality provisions would impede the development of new products and innovations.
Their new products and their new innovations.
Also, they feel new companies may encounter unnecessary barriers to entering the internet provider business because of the complicated regulations.
Network neutrality, a barrier to entry. Network neutrality, complicated regulations, barrier to entry. All data treated the same on the network seems pretty simple to me. I'm thinking that me having to pay so that my data is not degraded within the network, I'm thinking that's what I would call a barrier to entry, maybe?
The COPE Act would allow phone companies to enter the video market nationwide rather than seeking market-by-market approval through separate franchising agreements with individual localities.
It's interesting that the cable companies were required to negotiate franchises with each of the individual communities. This allows for public access, and it allows for the communities to require that the cable companies build out their networks to all the areas of their city, including areas where the poor folks live. This is because, of course, the cable companies were given access to public right-of-ways and tax incentives, and also given a monopoly on their initial service. The telephone companies, on the other hand, according to the COPE Act, will get to have a national franchise, which would mean that the individual communities wouldn't be able to negotiate based on whether or not the cable companies came into town. I'm a giant telephone conglomerate. I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm going to build out to all parts of the community and I'm not required. So let's see. Neighborhoods where people are going to pay big bucks for all kinds of fancy services. Neighborhoods where some of the people may not be able to afford it at all, and probably nobody's going to be able to pay for the fancy services. What am I going to spend my money on?
In the case of internet video, network neutrality could prevent phone and cable companies from offering faster delivery of data for video providers who are willing to pay higher rates.
Let's see. The telecom model is to take a big chunk of the bandwidth that passes across their network and dedicate that to their video and TV, and to large corporations who can afford to pay for the preferred service. The rest of the bandwidth is delegated to everybody else. No motivation to build out bigger and faster networks in the United States comparable to the rest of the developed world. No motivation to try to develop efficient solutions to use the existing bandwidth. Very little motivation for innovation from small businesses and startups, since the telecoms will always control the bandwidth that goes across their networks. Creating a system where people would have to pay for bandwidth within the network would violate a fundamental principle on which the Internet and the World Wide Web were based. This principle has created a space where people with few financial resources, but ambition and creativity and vision, can create and interact in novel and interesting ways unprecedented in history. This has resulted in amazing innovations and creative and interesting content from voices of all varieties from everywhere in the world in ways that can be distributed unlike anything that's ever happened before. All of this rests on the principle of network neutrality. But who cares? I'm going to get like 200 more channels of TV over my DSL line. Yeah.
All Missourians should have the opportunity to subscribe to high-speed internet services. Once again, thank you for contacting me regarding the COPE Act and network neutrality provisions. Please feel free to contact me regarding this or any other matter that is important to you. I am honored to serve as your representative in the U.S. Congress. Warm regards, Joann Emerson, Member of Congress.